To anyone who has dated been married to a twin that has passed away, how does it feel seeing the other twin still alive? My father was a twin. My uncle died when I was 12. They couldn't have been more opposite personality wise but were identical. The only thing that made them different is my dad's beard. He's had it my whole life and people often joke oh he should totally shave. That would be totally crazy. Once a few years ago my little sister got pushy and kept pressuring my dad to cut it all off. My father teared up and said it's hard enough seeing him in the mirror every day. That crap was deep. I feel for your father. Not exactly the same, but my grandfather died of a heart attack in 2003. He had a twin that lived about 2,000 miles away in Texas, Uncle Ted. Awesome guy whose personality, voice, style was so much like my grandpa's. He came to the funeral and not many people here were aware and the confusion was prevalent. Actually made the service a little funny. I remember when he first arrived, my mom greeted him and broke down into tears. "You look so much like dad," she said. Every single time I saw him since, my heart would skip a beat and I would think grandpa, but every time I'm wrong. That last part killed me. I'm sorry, that sucks. I am married to a twin and she had to go across the country for work training for a week. Every time her sister came around to hang out it drove me nuts. All I wanted to do was get my wife back. I have never thought about what it would be like if my wife died. Please excuse me while I go and shower my wife with love and affection. Please excuse me while I go and shower my wife, with love and affection. I can make it work. Not sure if it's what you're looking for since it's not married, but my dad was an identical twin. You couldn't really get more Doublemint commercial. Looked the same job field, married at the same time, and kids at the same time. They are twins, oddly enough. Fraternal, though, and we consider ourselves brothers. He passed away when I was 12 and my uncle kinda stepped in to play that father figure as I grew up. Even today, a couple decades later, I look at him and still see my father. He came to my big life events. I asked him about relationships and what to do with my life, and pretty much consider him my father. I've been asked about it many times, but I honestly don't know what I think. Perhaps because he's always been a bit part of my life, it's not weird to be very close to him. Maybe I was just too young and traumatized to really grasp the weirdness of the situation. I dunno. He's never replaced and could never replace my dad. He was an amazing man and I was lucky to have him for the time I did. But I sure as heck had about the best and closest backup I could have. I know this isn't me, but this can't be a very common occurrence so I thought I'd share. My dad's twin brother died 5 years ago. Before this, we were very close and got together with my uncle, aunt, and cousins every few weeks or so. They lived 2 hours away. While my uncle was dying, we would drive up every day to see him and help them out. After the funeral, we would make plans to get together with my aunt and cousins but she kept finding reasons to back out. We haven't seen her or my cousins in a year and a half. Avoiding the living twin seems like a very reasonable response. I recently had a friend die who had a twin. Her twin was at her funeral, obviously, and I had a hard time looking at her. It's like everything that she did, every movement, facial expression, and vocalization was just like my dead friend's. It was sort of like watching what it would have been like for my dead friend to have continued living. What if the dead twin was the living twin? Is the living twin now less because her twin is dead? It was extremely disconcerting. I can't imagine how difficult it is now for the living twin. As a twin, you don't really want to know how that twin is feeling. There's no way to put it into words, but there's probably very little light left in their world. Be good to them, please. I was engaged to a twin that died in a car accident in 2012. I was 25 at the time and working at a casino when I met a cocktail waitress and we hit it off quickly. She was a senior in college and very much into her sorority. One night we were going to meet up after my shift and on the way she got in a car accident and died on arrival to the hospital. I never got to say goodbye, kiss her, or try to comfort her. I attended the funeral but had to walk outside just minutes into the ceremony. I couldn't take sitting that close to her twin. I couldn't deal with her twin doing a eulogy and speaking. It was all as if she was there, in front of me, but it wasn't her. I blame myself to this day for asking her to meet up with me. I blame myself more for walking out of the funeral, and I have not spoken to her family since then. Her sister and parents have tried to reach me through Facebook, work and calls. I just ignore them all. It may be selfish, but I still haven't brought myself to accept she's gone, and it's because she was coming to see me after work at 3 AM. It will be 2 years in October. I am a twin with a twin that passed away. I don't feel complete anymore. Since she died, I've always felt like half of me is missing. It was much harder when I was younger and didn't understand the feelings, but now that I'm older, it's a bit easier to deal with. It's kind of hard to explain, but when I talk with other twins in the same situation, they report the same feelings. I'm a twin and this is my greatest fear. My dad had a twin that died, and ever since then my aunt has been a little too flirty with my dad. You just want Emmy for my dead brother's penis, Dad. I'm a twin whose twin died suddenly a little over 1 year ago. I feel incomplete in a way that is difficult to describe. I've felt very lonely and isolated since he died. I've never not had a person who knows and understands every detail of me and my life. The most difficult thing is to be mistaken as him by people who haven't heard about his death. But it's also one of my favorite things, because it reminds me that I'm still a twin. His name was Andrew. He was an incredible scholar of Hellenic studies. I'm sorry for your loss. Once a twin, always a twin. This doesn't answer the question exactly, but I'll never get another chance to share this otherwise. My great-great-grandfather lived in rural Minnesota in the late 19th century. He married a twin who passed away. Being a simpler time, he simply married the other twin and carried on. Must have been kinda awkward for everyone involved. I'm kind of glad he had a backup wife on standby. Time to get buried. I'm a twin who fell for and had a brief affair with another twin who died of a HOD shortly after. I had never met a twin. We are both identical sets. I remember it being one of the saddest moments of my life, locking eyes with her sister for the first time at the funeral. She didn't know who I was. Nobody there did. There are not words to describe looking into the eyes of the genetic duplicate of a lost love and not being recognized back. I'm keeping this story short due to feels. Can I just preface this by saying that I don't want anyone feeling overly sorry for me. I am learning to deal with it. So this starts when I was about 4 years old. We moved in next to this family with twin daughters who were about my age, and well, they were new in town as well. Since there was only one school in that county, we ended up going to school together and everything, and before you know it, we became the bestest of friends. I was much closer to one than the other. She was nice but had a different circle of friends and whatnot. Eventually the twin that I hung out with more became completely inseparable. Days turned to months and months to years. We finally started dating when turned 16. It was amazing. We never proclaimed love, but it didn't need to be said. It was just understood. Fast forward 2 years. We're walking home from dinner and all I remember is feeling her hand getting jerked out of mine and seeing her lying 4 feet from me. Freaking drunk driver had hit her from behind. Rushed her to the hospital, but she had severe lacerations in her lungs and a fractured backbone. Slipped into a coma and 3 days later she passed away. It's one of those things that leaves a permanent happiness-sucking vacuum in your life. I was in grief counseling for a couple of years after, and I think my life is finally at the plateau of normality. Yes, there are occasions when I'll come across something that reminds me of her, especially when I go back home for a visit, and I'll break down a little, but I think that's only human. This stuff changes you permanently. I think I have finally convinced myself that her twin is not the same person. Yes, it's the same face, voice, and to some extent mannerisms, but it's not the girl I love so much. It's hard to explain how I feel when I see her twin. I'd say it's mostly akin to having swallowed a fireball that's now lodged in your chest. She's a constant reminder of a ghost of a past I cannot change and the shattered dreams of what the future could have been. I try to avoid seeing her as much as I possibly can, but it's actually not that easy. As much as I hate the crippling pain, there is a little part of me that I'll let believe, even if it's briefly, that my love has returned before yanking myself back to reality. TLDR. It's more pain that you could imagine. I am married to an identical twin and have thought about this before. Not sure how I would actually feel or what I would do. They look the same and act the same for the most part, but wouldn't be the same. I would long for her but would move on. I'm married to a twin. My wife is still very much alive, but if she passes before me, I doubt her brother will look any more appealing to me than now. I don't have direct experience, but my friend's aunt is a twin. One of the twins passed away months after having a newborn. The husband was a reek. The other twin got pregnant a couple months after her twin passing, and is pregnant with twin girls. The husband took it as a sign that his wife was still with the family. Dang. Pain creates hope in terrible ways no one could ever realize. Holy crap. I have a twin and I can't imagine one of us dying before one another. You rock a boom if you're reading this. Stay fresh. Duel each other so you don't worry about who does first. I was married to a twin that passed away. It's tough to see his twin alive and healthy and my husband not. My husband died of cancer and his twin is healthy. I don't wish losing your soul on anyone. It's even harder when you have someone that looks exactly like him and has the same mannerisms, the same voice, the same personality, and he's not yours. If anyone is interested in the other side, my dad is currently married to a surviving twin. His at the time fiance's sister had been feeling sick the day of the wedding ceremony and a week later passed away from undiagnosed cancer. My stepmom took it very hard. I thought she was finally coping, but in the last few months she's fallen into drinking, lost her job and totaled her car. So yeah, twins can be like two parts of a whole and sometimes it's hard for one to go on normally without the other. For the love of God, please clarify. My girlfriend has a twin and she also has cervical cancer. I had always thought about the chance of her dying. Fortunately her treatment has been going really well. What I have never thought about was seeing her twin sister. That would be terrible. She's a sweet girl just like my girlfriend, but I really don't think I could let myself even see her if something happened to my so. Really great question. Can't believe this is about the only thing I've somewhat been able to answer on this subreddit. My dad was a twin and he died when I was 13. I know it's not exactly the same, but I hated when his brother came around after that. My dad was a great guy with 4 kids and his twin was a Peter Pan wannabe who spent all his time lazing around and had no job or responsibilities. It drove me nuts that he was healthy while my dad was gone. I have since grown up and matured and I still have a hard time being around him, but that is less to do with resentment and more to do with the fact that he is just weird. So, my wife passed away 2 years ago, and while her sister is not her twin, they might as well be. They essentially look and act the same. Her sister is maybe not as sweet as my wife was, and is a couple of years older, but they are so alike. Now, how does this make me feel? Well, to be honest, it fricks me up a decent amount. About a year after my wife died, my sister-in-law got a divorce from her douche of a husband. I was at a family event with my in-laws a couple of months back. It was the perfect storm. I had just started putting myself back on the market and she was as well. We flirted a lot. She has since wanted more. It would be so easy for me to have a relationship with her. In fact, we've known each other for longer than I knew my wife. She tried to date me before I met her sister, but at the time I wasn't in a good place. But I also realized that it is not a healthy relationship and I would literally just be trying to find a replacement for my wife. The problem when your spouse dies suddenly is you are left with a love for someone who is no longer there physically. So having someone you can just plug into that part of your heart is very seductive. Anyway, that's pretty much as I want to say. My girlfriend's mother is an identical twin and the mother died a few years ago. At most her mom's identical twin reminds her of her own mother, but she really sees them as different people. They actually both had a lot of similar health problems and were in quite a few medical studies. Of course, when it comes to parents it's an emotional connection. When it comes to lovers, looks is a huge part, so maybe it is harder to see a twin of a lover as a different person. I can't answer this exact question, but I do have a story similar. My uncle, we'll call him Jeff, died of a heart attack and I went to the funeral and found out beforehand that Jeff's brother was a pastor and would help run the funeral ceremony. It was weird, no one gave me a heads up about it, but Jeff's brother was a twin, and by twin I mean exact copy. He looked extremely close and even sounded the same. It was pretty freaky that it was almost like Jeff was running his own funeral. He lived pretty far from us, so I imagine Jeff's wife didn't see him much either. I can't imagine how Jeff's wife felt seeing him the whole time. Kind of rare, I thought, for a pastor to lead the funeral of a close family member. My mum was an identical twin. She passed away of an aneurysm in 2011. My dad thought it might be a little weird seeing her twin, but it was actually harder for her to see him. Identical twins have a particularly strong bond. Every time she saw him, it would remind her of my mum. It's been years now, and she's still never been the same since. She can't be around my dad for long. She told him once and his response was, "Well, how do you think I feel? It's been pretty rough ever since." My grandfather was a twin, and after he died suddenly his twin brother told my mom and grandmother he couldn't see them anymore because it hurt too much. This was over 25 years ago, and my mom has seen her uncle twice. I was there one of the times and she started bawling as soon as she saw him and said it hurt seeing what her dad would like if he was still alive. I had a friend that we used to tour with back in the day. At the time, he was only into party drugs and some prescription meds. Because the people in my band were not into drugs, there was always a lot of friction between him and the other guys. Long story short, he graduated from being a recreational user to getting hooked and, after finally getting clean, overdoses having his one last taste. Fast forward a year or two after he passed and I'm at a show. I'm watching the band play and out of the corner of my eye I see my friend and my heart stops. I remember my heart stopped and I had to go talk to this person that looked exactly like my friend that died 2 years earlier. It turns out that the person was my friend's identical twin that was in the Air Force for the entire time we were touring together. I didn't know he even had a sibling, let alone a twin. TLDR. My friend dies and I meet the twin I never knew he had 2 years after his death randomly at a show. I wasn't married to a twin, but I used to date one. He wound up being a major alcoholic, and I couldn't handle it, so we broke up. A year later he wound up dying of liver failure, on my birthday, no less. I remember being in the hospital before he passed, and his twin brother was there. It was startling for me to see someone that was so close to being shorn, but the hardest part by far was when his brother looked at me and said, "This is what I look like dying." I will never forget the gut-wrenching feeling of hearing that sentence. I had a very good friend about 31 years old drop dead about 5 years ago. She had a twin who I was friends with through her sister. I personally did not have a problem telling them apart, but my kids do. It was hard for my kids, and actually my wife too, because they were so reminded of my BFF. It was like the deceased twin was alive again. I don't have a problem seeing the surviving twin at all. I welcome her company. I feel like there is some comfort or unsaid understanding since we both have incredible holes in our hearts. Stop cutting onions over here in a Screddit. WTF are you all cooking that you need so many freaking onions? It's quite surreal seeing a post like this at this stage of my life. I'm close to 6 months after losing my twin brother to a terrible accident. My twin found the love of his life fresh out of high school and she is the only woman I've ever seen him be with and truly be happy. 2 kids, a marriage and a relocation to Melbourne, Australia. We are all from New Zealand. Saw them both live life for all that it was worth, cut rudely short by his passing. There isn't a day that goes by where I feel that I am some sort of a reminder for her and her 2 beautiful kids. A reminder of what, you might ask? I seriously don't know. I guess I'm still coming to grips with the empty feeling I have knowing he's not here with me. But the more I feel that, the more I hear him saying to me that it's okay. I almost feel guilty that I am here and he isn't. And seeing her is a constant reminder that he had so much more to live for than I did. I can't imagine how she feels when she sees me. I know guilt isn't the road I should take. The counseling is helping a lot, but still, it's a hard thing to take on board. She touches down here in Sydney, Australia, from Auckland, New Zealand in 2 weeks. I really can't wait to see her and I think it would do us both some good. A good chance to move forward for the both of us. Not married or dated, but my dad was a twin. He died of cancer. During the cancer fight, he lost a lot of weight and one of the things he would say to the nurses and docs when my uncle visited in the hospital was, "Did you know I used to be a twin?" It was one of his favorite jokes till the end. I understand the premise of the question, but I feel a strong emotional urge to bring this up. It would be a terrible blow to me if my twin died. As much as I am my own person, there is a connection I have with my twin that is extraordinarily intimate, more so than with any of my other brothers. Partially because we went through the same things at the same time around the same places and people. We understand each other on a level that means I can say in a sentence what I'd need a paragraph to say to others. We are different people but the same to a degree that a substantial population of the world will never understand. TLDR. I may one day look in the mirror and see the face of a dead man, only to recognize me. Well, sort of. My husband's best friend rolled his truck and died in 2010. He has had a fraternal twin brother and we see him sometimes. The friend and the twin look a lot alike and their voices were identical, in my opinion. The brother actually just came over this weekend to meet our new baby and watch football. My husband says it's sort of like having his friend around in some ways, but his brother is his own person. It's comforting for them to reminisce about the friend. My dad is an identical twin. He's also still alive, so take this for what it is worth. My dad and my uncle, well they are identical twins and to most people look identical, are very distinctly different to me. Their voices are different, their demeanor is different, they look different, they speak to me differently. Even from a very young age, I, and all my siblings, could tell the difference between them, while just about no one else could. People who have known them their entire lives confuse them. I never see my uncle and think, oh man, he reminds me of my dad. He's just not my dad. With all that said, I really can't envision seeing my uncle after my father passes and it reminding me of my dad. But I also still have my dad, so maybe if he passes away before my uncle, and it's been a few years, it will affect me differently. So, I dated an identical twin when he asked me out to the school dance. We were already teammates together, so this took me by surprise, but we ended up hitting it off after the dance. After he and his twin dropped out of school we kinda lost touch though. Both of the twins ended up being really successful anyway. Later, the guy I dated died serving our country and through his twins and my grief we ended up bonding, married, and now have children together. My husband looks just like the boy I dated so long ago save for the hole on the side of his head. My grandma had a sister a year older than her who looks just like her twin. My grandma passed away suddenly, and my grandfather and great aunt basically started dating immediately afterward. It was so weird. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.